The guard's footsteps echoed down the corridor of Alcatraz. Cell block 6:47 a.m. In cell 47, Bumpy Johnson sat on his narrow bunk, reading yesterday's New York Chronicle. The headline made him smile. Harlem businessman found shot dead outside jazz club. Vincent Smooth Eddie Patterson, 38 years old, 3 bullets to the chest, dead before the ambulance arrived. What the newspaper didn't mention, what the SFPD couldn't figure out, was that this murder had been orchestrated from a prison cell 3,000 miles away by a man who hadn't set foot in Harlem for 5 years. Bumpy folded the newspaper carefully and placed it on his desk next to 4 others. Each one carried a similar headline. Each one marked another name crossed off his list, and each one proved something the FBI thought was impossible. Ellsworth Bumpy Johnson was running Harlem from the most secure prison in America. To understand what happened on the morning of September 15, 1957, you need to understand what Alcatraz was supposed to be. The Rock, America's Devil's Island, a fortress of concrete and steel sitting in the middle of San Francisco Bay, designed for one purpose, to make dangerous men disappear. No escape attempts succeeded. No contraband got in. No messages got out. At least, that's what the warden believed. But Bumpy Johnson had been studying prisons since 1928. 29 years of lockups had taught him something the Bureau of Prisons never understood. You don't control a prison by ruling the guards. You control it by understanding the system. Every prison has rules. Every rule has exceptions. Every exception has a price, and every price can be negotiated. When Bumpy arrived at Alcatraz in 1952, he didn't make enemies. He made investments. The first investment was Tommy Numbers Romano, a former bookie from Newark, doing 15 years for tax evasion. Tommy missed his daughter's wedding because of his sentence. He cried about it every night for 3 months. That's when Bumpy approached him in the yard, casual as Sunday morning conversation. "Your daughter Angela, right? Pretty girl. Married that contractor from Queens." Tommy's head snapped up. How did Bumpy know about Angela? More importantly, how did he know about the wedding that had happened 2 weeks ago? Bumpy smiled. "My people in New York keep me informed." Angela looked beautiful in that white dress. Shame you couldn't walk her down the aisle. Tommy stared at him. "How do you—" "The question isn't how I know," Bumpy interrupted. "The question is what you're willing to do to make sure I keep knowing." He leaned closer. "I can have eyes on your family every day, make sure they're safe, make sure they're happy. All I need in return is small favors, information, timing, cooperation when I ask for it." Tommy became Bumpy's first lieutenant inside Alcatraz. Within 6 months, he had 10 more. The second investment was Guard Captain William Mackenzie, a 23-year veteran with gambling debts and a sick wife. Mackenzie thought he was untouchable. He thought wrong. One day in the yard, Bumpy walked up to him and handed him a piece of paper. "Your wife's cancer treatment costs $400 a month," Bumpy said quietly. "Your salary is $180 a month. That's $220 short every month for the next 2 years. Math doesn't lie." Mackenzie's face went pale. "How do you know about my wife?" "I know about everyone's wife," Bumpy replied. "The question is, do you want help with those medical bills, or do you want to watch her suffer because you're too proud to make a deal?" 3 days later, Mackenzie brought Bumpy a radio, small, hidden in a Bible. Reception was clear enough to pick up New York stations if you knew the right frequency. Bumpy now had a direct line to the outside world. But the real genius of Bumpy's system wasn't the radio or the guards or even the inmates. It was the mail. Every prisoner at Alcatraz could send and receive 1 letter per week, heavily censored, carefully monitored, every word examined by prison staff. But Bumpy had discovered something the censors never noticed. Hidden messages don't always live in words. Letter number 1, sent to his cousin Ruth in Harlem. "Dear Ruth, I hope this finds you well. The weather here is cold, but I'm managing. Please tell Margaret I think about her often. The commissary has good apples this week, especially the red ones. Give my love to everyone on 135th Street. Innocent enough. But Ruth knew the code. Cold weather meant planning phase. Margaret was the target's name, but not Margaret the person. Margaret Street, where Vincent Patterson ran his numbers operation. Red apples meant violence was coming. 135th Street was the confirmation. 2 weeks later, letter number 2. The food here is terrible. Thursday's dinner was particularly bad. I threw it away around 9 p.m. Sometimes I dream of Small's Paradise and their fried chicken. If you see Junior there, tell him I said hello. Translation: Thursday night, 9 p.m., hit takes place. Small's Paradise was Vincent's regular spot. Junior was the nickname for Marcus Jr. Williams, one of Bumpy's old enforcers who'd stayed loyal while Bumpy was locked up. The third letter contained the final details: location, timing, method, all hidden in casual conversation about prison life and family gossip. By the time the censors approved it, Vincent Patterson was already a dead man. He just didn't know it yet. September 12, 1957, 8:30 p.m. Vincent Patterson left his girlfriend's apartment on 142nd Street, just like he did every Thursday. He was running the biggest numbers operation in Upper Harlem, bringing in $50,000 a week, all on territory that used to belong to Bumpy Johnson. While Bumpy rotted in Alcatraz, Vincent was getting rich on his turf. Vincent walked 3 blocks to Small's Paradise, where he held court every Thursday night, table 7 in the back, surrounded by his crew, counting money and planning the next week's operations. He felt invincible. Bumpy was gone. The Italians had backed off. Harlem was his for the taking. At 8:47 p.m., Vincent stepped out of Small's Paradise for a cigarette. The alley behind the club was dark, private, perfect for smoking and making phone calls without being overheard. He'd done it 100 times before. Marcus Jr. Williams was waiting in the shadows. Jr. had received his instructions 3 weeks ago, not through direct contact, but through a chain of messages that traced back to a seemingly innocent letter from Alcatraz. The letter Ruth had shown him contained one crucial detail hidden in plain sight. The tobacco here is expensive, but sometimes you have to pay for quality. Tobacco meant silencer. Expensive meant clean job. No witnesses. Quality meant make it look professional. Junior stepped out of the shadows as Vincent lit his cigarette. Vincent turned, surprised but not alarmed. He knew Junior from the old days when they'd both worked for Bumpy. "Junior, what brings you around?" "Message from the boss," Junior said quietly. "Boss?" Vincent laughed. "Bumpy's locked up on the Rock. Been 5 years now. He ain't the boss of nothing." Junior pulled out a .48 revolver with a makeshift silencer. "That's where you're wrong. 3 shots. Quick, quiet, efficient." Vincent Patterson collapsed against the brick wall, blood spreading across his white shirt. Junior checked for a pulse, found nothing, and walked away. The entire hit took less than 30 seconds. Meanwhile, 3,000 miles away, Bumpy Johnson was lying on his bunk in cell 47, listening to the radio hidden in his Bible. The UMBC was playing jazz, but he wasn't listening to the music. He was waiting for the news update at 11 p.m. When the announcer mentioned breaking news from Harlem, Bumpy smiled and turned off the radio. The next morning, September 13th, the headlines confirmed what Bumpy already knew. Vincent Patterson was dead. The NYPD had no suspects, no witnesses, no leads. It was a professional hit, clean and untraceable. But Vincent wasn't Bumpy's only target. Over the next 6 months, 4 more of Bumpy's rivals died under mysterious circumstances. Each death appeared unrelated. Each killing seemed random. But the pattern was clear to anyone who understood Bumpy's methods. October 23rd, Danny the Fish Morrison, found floating in the East River with a bullet in his head. November 15th, Carmen Rodriguez, shot outside his apartment building in Spanish Harlem. December 7th, Big Willie Thompson, killed in a drive-by shooting on Lenox Avenue. January 3rd, Anthony Tony Bags Marconi, found dead in the trunk of his car in Queens. Each name had been on Bumpy's list since 1952. Each man had tried to take over pieces of his territory while he was locked away. Each death sent the same message. Bumpy Johnson's reach extended far beyond the walls of Alcatraz. The FBI took notice after the 3rd killing. Special Agent Harrison Mitchell, was assigned to investigate the pattern. Mitchell was smart, thorough, and completely baffled. How could a man locked in the most secure prison in America orchestrate 5 murders in 5 different neighborhoods? Mitchell's investigation led him to one conclusion: it was impossible. Bumpy had been in solitary confinement twice during the period when the murders occurred. His mail was monitored, his visitors were restricted, his cell was searched weekly. There was no way he could be communicating with the outside world. But Mitchell missed what Bumpy understood perfectly. The strongest chains aren't made of steel. They're made of loyalty, fear, and carefully calculated debts. Bumpy had spent 5 years building a network that operated independently, triggered by signals so subtle that even trained investigators couldn't detect them. The key was Marcus Jr. Williams. Jr. wasn't just a killer for hire. He was a chess player, thinking 3 moves ahead, just like Bumpy had taught him. Every Thursday, Jr. would visit his grandmother in Brooklyn, sweet old lady, 87 years old, who loved to listen to the radio. She particularly enjoyed a gospel program that aired Sunday mornings on WNBC. What grandmother didn't know was that Jr. had modified her radio to receive transmissions from a specific frequency, the same frequency Bumpy used on his hidden radio in Alcatraz. Every Sunday morning, while grandmother listened to gospel music, Jr. would sit in her kitchen and receive coded instructions from Bumpy. The codes were simple but effective. A specific song request called into the radio station meant target acquired. A weather report containing certain keywords meant proceed with plan. A dedication to a special friend meant abort mission. Bumpy had turned a gospel radio show into his command center. But the most ingenious part of Bumpy's operation wasn't the codes or the radio or even the network of loyal associates. It was the misdirection. While the FBI focused on trying to trace direct communication between Bumpy and his killers, they missed the real source of his power: information. Bumpy knew his targets' routines because he'd been collecting intelligence on them for years. Every letter from family members contained updates about who was where, when, and why. Every visitor brought news from the street. Every newspaper gave him a window into the changing dynamics of Harlem's underworld. He didn't need to give specific orders because he'd already planted the seeds of their destruction years ago. The downfall began with a mistake. In February 1958, Guard Captain Mackenzie got greedy. He'd been accepting payments from Bumpy's organization for over a year, but his wife's medical bills were getting worse, and he needed more money. So he approached another prisoner, Scarface Eddie Torino, and offered to smuggle in contraband for the right price. Torino was working for the FBI. He'd been placed in Alcatraz specifically to investigate how Bumpy was maintaining his outside operations. When Mackenzie made his offer, Torino had him exactly where the Bureau wanted him. The sting operation was swift and brutal. Mackenzie was arrested, his radio was discovered, and suddenly the FBI had a direct line into Bumpy's communication network. They monitored his coded transmissions for 3 weeks, learning his methods, identifying his associates, mapping his entire operation. On March 15, 1958, coordinated raids hit 12 locations across New York City. Jr. Williams was arrested at his grandmother's house, the modified radio still warm from that morning's transmission. Tommy Romano's daughter Angela was questioned about the letters her father had been sending to mysterious addresses. Ruth Johnson, Bumpy's cousin, was brought in for interrogating about her weekly correspondence with her incarcerated relative. The network that had taken 5 years to build collapsed in a single morning. But Bumpy Johnson had one final surprise waiting. When the FBI agents entered his cell to confront him with evidence of his operation, they found him sitting calmly at his desk, reading that morning's newspaper. The headline read, "FBI Raids, Smash Harlem Crime Network." Bumpy looked up at Agent Mitchell and smiled. "Took you long enough," he said quietly. "I was wondering when you'd figure it out." Mitchell was confused. "You don't seem surprised." "Surprised?" Bumpy laughed. "Son, I've been planning for this day since 1952. You think I put all my eggs in one basket?" He gestured to the newspaper. "This network you just destroyed? That was the decoy. a carefully constructed distraction to keep you busy while my real operation stayed hidden. Agent Mitchell felt his stomach drop. What real operation? Bumpy's smile widened. The one that's been running parallel to everything you just discovered. Different people, different methods, different communication channels. While you were chasing radio signals and coded letters, my real lieutenants were building something bigger, something you'll never find because you don't even know it exists. It was a bluff. It had to be. But as Mitchell looked into Bumpy's eyes, he saw something that chilled him to the bone. Certainty. Bumpy Johnson wasn't a man who'd been caught. He was a man who'd allowed himself to be caught. The question was why. 3 months later, Mitchell had his answer. Another body turned up in Harlem. Michael Mickey Dice Fratelli, shot execution style in his car outside a restaurant in Little Italy. Mickey had been trying to muscle into the numbers racket that Bumpy's defunct network had once protected. His death sent a message that reverberated through every crime family in New York. Bumpy Johnson's influence hadn't died with his first network. It had simply evolved. Bumpy Johnson remained in Alcatraz until his release in 1963. During those final 5 years, no more mysterious murders could be definitively linked to him. No more coded radio transmissions were discovered. No more elaborate mail schemes were uncovered. To all appearances, the FBI had successfully dismantled his operation. But every 6 months, like clockwork, someone who'd tried to claim Bumpy's old territory would disappear. Not killed, just gone. Relocated to other cities, encouraged to pursue opportunities elsewhere, convinced that Harlem wasn't a healthy place for their business interests. The methods were subtler now, but the message was the same. Bumpy Johnson's throne remained empty because anyone who tried to sit in it found themselves politely but firmly removed. The truth was simpler and more terrifying than any elaborate conspiracy. Bumpy hadn't needed radio communications or coded letters to control Harlem from Alcatraz. He'd needed something far more powerful: respect. Respect earned through decades of protecting the community, earned through keeping his word, earned through understanding that real power doesn't come from fear, it comes from being indispensable. When Bumpy walked out of Alcatraz on June 7, 1963, carrying his possessions in a paper bag, Harlem welcomed him home like a returning king, not because he'd terrorized the neighborhood from prison, but because he'd protected it. Every rival who'd tried to exploit Harlem in his absence had found themselves dealing with a community that remembered who their real protector was. The young men who'd grown up hearing stories about Bumpy Johnson, the shop owners who'd prospered under his protection, the families who'd received help when they needed it most, the entire ecosystem of loyalty and respect that Bumpy had built over 30 years. That was his real network. That was his true power. And that was something no prison walls could contain. Special Agent Mitchell retired from the FBI in 1965, never fully understanding how Bumpy Johnson had controlled Harlem from 3,000 miles away. In his final report, he wrote, "Subject demonstrates unprecedented ability to maintain criminal organization while incarcerated. Methods remain largely unknown. Recommend continued surveillance upon release." But Mitchell had missed the point entirely. Bumpy Johnson hadn't controlled a criminal organization from prison. He'd maintained a community's loyalty. The difference was everything, and it explained why, decades after his death, people in Harlem still tell stories about the man who could orchestrate hits from Alcatraz while never lifting a finger in anger. The man who proved that true power isn't about what you can force people to do. It's about what they'll do for you when you can't force them to do anything at all.